Hi boys and girls. Today I'm going to model an example of a subtraction problem and how we problem solve in class as fourth graders. So the first thing we do is we read the problem. I notice in big red letters it says estimation. Estimating means I'm not going to solve for the exact answer, but rather I'll round and get something reasonable. The problem says Carlos has 2,175 marbles in his collection. Emily has 1,833 marbles in her collection. Carlos says that he has about 1,000 more marbles than Emily. Is Carlos correct? This is what we call a comparison problem. We have two subjects. In this case, it's Carlos and his friend Emily, and we're seeing who has more or who has less. So our strip diagram is going to look a little different here. You're going to be comparing the two subjects. But as we know in class, anytime you compare two subjects, we are going to be subtracting. So this problem solving structure we have is called UPS check. The U stands for understand. So as soon as the student reads the question, this is the box where they put their facts in that they know about the problem. So as you can see here, I went, Carlos has 2,175 marbles. So that's a fact, I wrote it down. I also wrote down that Emily has 1,833 marbles in her collection. That's a fact, wrote it down. And then Carlos says he has about 1,000 more marbles than Emily. And then I always tell students to write the question that is being asked, which in this case, is Carlos correct? Okay, so that's understand. We're just listing the really important facts, and then we're definitely listing the question. That way we make sure we're answering the question. The P in UPS check stands for plan. What is our plan to solve? Just like in our previous slide, I showed you that strip diagram. Usually for students, I tell them they can draw a picture or a strip diagram. There's also other methods like guess and check, or draw a table, or act it out, or solve a simpler problem. But just to simplify things, I usually either say draw a picture or a strip diagram when in doubt. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and draw my strip diagram. So I use this strip diagram to show that Carlos has more, he's on top, and then I have Emily on bottom, and there's just a missing piece in between 1,833 and up top 2,175. I know in order to find that missing piece, I need to subtract. But in order to do that, since I'm using the word about, I need to round the numbers first. This is just my picture representation. Now I move on to the solve box, which is what S stands for, and this is where I actually solve and do the computation part of my problem. So this is when we round and estimate, we talk about the most appropriate place value to round to. Noticing that both numbers are in the thousands place, and if I rounded 1,833 to the nearest thousand, I would get 2,000. And if I rounded 2,175 to the nearest thousand, I would get 2,000. 2,000 minus 2,000 is 0. So the thousands place is not the most accurate way to round. So then I move in one more and I round to the nearest 100. So then I go ahead and show my work, and I do 2,175, and then I tell the kids to underline the place they're rounding to. In this case, it's 100. Draw an arrow to the neighbor. If the neighbor is 5 or more, we add one more to the digit we underlined. So in this case, it's a 7, so it is 5 or more. We're going to add one more, and this one that we underline now becomes a 2. This 2 stays the same. The 1 just became a 2, and all the other digits become zeros because that's what happens when we round. And now we're going to go ahead and round our other number, which was 1,833. In this case, we're also we're rounding to the nearest 100, so I'm underlining the 8. That's in the hundredths place. We draw an arrow to the neighbor. In this case, it's only a 3. It is not 5 or more. It's actually, we say 4 or less, let it rest. So the 8 does not change, it stays the same. So we have our 1, we have our 8, and of course the rest becomes zeros. And now we just subtract to find the difference in between. 0 minus 0 is 0, 0 minus 0 is 0. We cannot take away 8 from 2, so we need to regroup. This 2 becomes a 1. this 2 becomes a 12. We took a 10 from the thousands place and brought it over here to the hundreds place. Now we do 12 minus 8, which is 4, and 1 minus 1, which is 0. Now the trickiest part here for students is this checkbox, which is really where I'm expecting them to explain their thinking, to tell me how they got their answer. So I want them to use math vocabulary words. So I would say something like, I used the comparison model to subtract both marble amounts. I first rounded to the nearest 100 to get an accurate comparison. Once I rounded, I subtracted 2,200 and 1,800 and got 400. Now, I really want to make sure the students are answering the question, is Carlos correct? So we go back to that U box and we read, is Carlos correct? And then we answer it here. No, Carlos is not correct. He has around 400 more marbles, not 1,000. And then as you can see there, my explanation is all done. So this is when your students go home and are working on problem solving. This is the model I encourage them to use just because it shows their facts, their plan, solving, and then checking or explaining their reasoning here. I hope this helps. Feel free to leave a comment or email me with any questions you might have.